been a bit of a rush, as you can see. And I've been told I need to check to make sure we're broadcasting. And I see the thumbs up, which is excellent. So here we are. This is, if I can find the agenda, this is the Communities in Place overview and scrutiny to be held at the meeting space, Block 1, Floor 2, County Hall, Wednesday the 12th of January, at just after 2 p.m. So we shall just start with the first item on the agenda, which is apologies for absence.
Good afternoon, Chair. We have apologies for absence from Margaret Richardson and Stephen Bridget. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And I think everyone else is here, so that's good. The minutes of the previous meeting, are you agree that I sign them? Excellent, thank you. Disclosure of members' interests. I think we all know what that is. If you've got anything to declare, now is the time to declare it. And don't say any, so we shall move on to 4, which is the forward plan of cabinet decisions. And Sean, did you want to just add something to that? But you're going to need to put your microphone on.
Yeah, there's only one item I think I want to bring to your attention this afternoon. It's the bus service improvement plan that's going to Cabinet on the 8th of March. I think you've had presentations up to now about the process on that. The actual report is going to Cabinet in March, so it's a case of whether or not you wanted to come to this committee beforehand. It's to be confirmed, and the reason for that is because obviously you've got a very busy programme for February and March, and I wasn't really sure when the papers went out how much of the Storm Alban review would take up your time over the next couple of months, so I've just left that for you to decide today whether or not you want to have it.
Thanks for the heads up, Sean. So what would you like to do? Councillor Castle and then Councillor Morford.
Thank you for asking my opinion. I think it's such an important feature of Northumberland life, and I'm not saying neglected, but it's always controversial and difficult. And I think the Scrutiny Committee would be well employed in actually examining this plan. It's an important thing.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's very important and should come to scrutiny, and I'd like to still be on this Scrutiny Committee when it comes to it, but I'm not sure if I will.
Yeah, well, that's way above our pay grade, Councillor Morford. So,
so yes, okay, going to your agenda, the March meeting, 2nd of March, will come here.
I take it that the people who are silent agree with it, that it should come. It would appear so. Excellent, right? So it shall. The next thing on the agenda is Brian.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I know we're skirted by the minutes. I just want to make a point on the minutes. I don't want to go through them all, but I was just wondering if we could have a little bit more in-depth reports around that. And, you know, the first one there being, you know, the market's made a small surplus and I just want to break down those figures a wee bit more. And I know that maybe it was touched on, but there were searching questions for more information. And I'm mindful that minutes and notes aren't as accurate as what they used to be years ago, but like a little bit more information would be beneficial.
You would like a fuller minute on that?
Well, just on that, Chair, there were a number of actions arising from that presentation that Rob gave last month that we've actually followed up on. So we've asked for a further report on the market strategy, on the enforcement of the 20 mile an hour zones. I think was an issue as well, and there were 1 or 2 other items that came out of that discussion that I've actually forwarded to Rob and his senior management team for inclusion on the work programme going forward. But as I said to you before, we are quite busy in February and March and probably April as well, so it's a case of fitting everything in. But it is in hand.
Great, thank you very much.
Councillor Gallagher, then Councillor Morford.
Just to return on that, you know, there was some searching questions within that meeting that really, the facts aren't there, and I respect that, you know, those figures will come through. But even going to the presentations of the Go Smarter, Safe routes to school and things like that, I contacted the person who gave the presentation afterwards for more information, and I'm still waiting on that information. So it's just that follow-up, you know, should we skirt by the minutes as quickly? I really don't think so. I think we should look at them a wee bit better than what we've done. And there is understanding from me that we can't always get that information, but I think the minutes of a previous meeting are very important.
Sorry,
And it should be noted. Thank you.
I didn't mean to play that down. All I was saying was that the actions have been looked at. But you're right, because there may well be actions that I haven't picked up. And if you want to check on that, then you're quite entitled to do so.
And I shall certainly make, well, we shall have a more forensic view of the minutes at the next meeting, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Morfitt.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Gallagher, actually. I think it's worth just checking the minutes properly. And I've missed my chance to just make one tiny comment. I picked up a small typo. At the bottom of page 3, it just says that 37% of children walk to school, with 6% either walking or scooting. I think it means cycling or scooting. I'm not 100% sure.
I'm sure
But I
it
think it's a
does.
typo.
But, well, perhaps we should go back over the YouTube feed and we'll be able to see that, wouldn't we? So yes, that's my knuckles wrapped. Next time we shall turn the minutes page by page and I shall indulge you as much as you like. Right, so we're now on to item 5, which is the overview and scrutiny report. And a long, long way to my left are the people who are going to talk to this, and it says on my agenda that Councillor Richard Wearmouth is going to be here, but I don't see him. I mean, I realise he is ever present everywhere.
Sorry,
but,
Chair, he's given his apologies.
oh, well, there we are. Okay, so fire away. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. I'm Julie Dennett-Seal. I'm the Corporate Complaints Manager. You may remember a while ago, in February and August, I came and I presented an improvement framework for complaints and corporate feedback. I was invited back to give an update of how we're doing. I just wanted to provide a very brief update with you today. I think the report is quite clear, and just be available for any questions that you've got. We have obviously had to pare back the speed of our enhanced plan due to the pandemic and making sure that services were available to deliver the frontline services. But we're now refocused and we're revisiting a lot of the improvements that we had on the action plan. We are now under a different directorate. We're now part of the Improvement and Innovation Directorate, so we're no longer under governance. And with that comes a fresh set of eyes with what we're doing and how we're going to drive issues forward. I just wanted to reassure you basically that we are moving forward with our refresh of the suite of policies. We have the unreasonably persistent and vexatious contact policy in place now. It's been approved and agreed, which is obviously in place to support staff and residents. We're about to send out the corporate feedback policy to get any additional comments, and probably and most importantly and reassuring for you guys, we're actually pursuing a new bespoke system. We've had several meetings and demonstrations with a system that is going to be far more comprehensive for recording and pulling out trend analysis for complaint management. Which means that in turn I'll be able to provide more detailed account of information to you, and we can make sure that continuous learning and improvement is taken from that data, and it's a far more intelligent and in-depth data system that we'll have. That is basically all I have to say to you today. I just wanted to be available for any questions that you have.
Any questions? Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, we're heading for 2 years into this pandemic stroke whatever, where even the most angriest, grumpiest people seem to be a bit more grumpy and a bit more angry. I don't know if other members or longer term members have picked up that, you know, at one time you got a letter or a phone call, now it's you get an angry email, or even worse, some sort of complaint is more. We used to sort of moans, complaints. You know, there was a sort of pecking system of what people moaned about. And with the pandemic, it seems to be the bar seems to have gone up an awful long way. That or down, whichever way you want to look at it, Chair. That people just seem to hide behind a screen, can say what on earth they're like. I mean, I got one in this morning about from someone and it's about trials of doctors and nurses for dishing out the vaccines. And yeah, you can bat them away, but there is something sinister about some of these things. Have we got sufficient data, this is the question, that says prior pandemic, and that will eventually come to post-pandemic? And will the graph go up and down, or what, along and then down again? Is there a pattern coming, and have we ever pressed vexatious buttons? Because if we don't press them, what's the point in having them? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really valid point. The answer is yes, we do have that data. It's the drilled down data that we're having difficulty with. So figures with regards to how many that we're receiving, absolutely we have that data. It is it is increasing. That's a national situation though. Within complaints management, I've been dealing with complaints for 25 years now, and year on year in any organisation they go up naturally, but I appreciate that obviously we've had some mitigating circumstances, but we absolutely have got that data, and in the next complaint report I've actually started to provide some information on that and how COVID has actually affected complaints management, so I will absolutely be able to provide that. I am also part of the National Complaints Managers Forum, so I speak to other complaints managers nationally with regards to trends and how that's affecting different organisations. So it is a piece of work that we're very mindful of and working with the local ombudsman around. But I do agree, there has been an increase in complaints, but what we're trying to do is work very closely with the customer services team so that we can identify those kinds of trends that come in and maybe look at regular issues that come about and how we respond to them. So it's absolutely worthy data, and when we get the new system in, we'll be able to drill down a lot better into those trends and deal with them.
Okay, Richard, yeah?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a complaint that I pick up all the time, and it's Veronica, Councillor Jones does exactly the same. It's people who buy a house, must be in the dark, must be in the middle of the night or whatever, and then wake up the next day and find out, lo and behold, there's a main road. Or there's a road runs past the house, and suddenly they come onto the council laws for us to virtually take all the traffic away from the road, etc. I mean, one of the ones that she has is Hadrian's Wall. Now, that road's been around for over 2,000 years. And I just think that, you know, some people seem to think that they can just blame everybody but themselves on all the complaints they make. And it's everybody else's fault but themselves for buying a house with a road next to it. And I just wonder if other councillors pick up these sort of similar gripes. That was the word. It was always gripes, grumbles and something else. I just wonder, what is the percentage of change? Is it up by 20%, or is the nastiness up by 20%, or what is that sort of figure? Because we want to see it come down.
I'm not sure whether you can answer that, Julie, but if you...
I may be able to, actually.
Oh, wow. Well, there we go. Look at that.
So...
Nothing to complain about there.
Let's have a look here.
I've then got Councillor Castle and then Councillor Gallagher.
I believe it's a 42% overall increase, but let me just say something. This is the problem that we have with the data at the moment, and I will say this every time that I read out any data for complaints. The most important thing that we need to be reporting on is upheld versus not upheld, because a not upheld complaint doesn't necessarily mean that we have found that nothing's gone wrong. It would also mean that we haven't met that individual's expectations. Everyone's expectations of what service is are completely different. So I think it's really important that that is at the forefront of this new system that we're looking at, that we can record whether complaints were actually upheld or not, and that's a performance indicator that we focus on, not the amount of complaints that we receive, because I think those two figures, quite rightly for the reasons that you've given, tell two very different stories. So I've always said that the new system that we get has to have a focus on the upheld complaints and what we actually done. Whilst we do appreciate that there may be some issues around the not upheld with terms of communication, how we deliver our messages, I really think that that's a good focus and a very valid point that you've made there.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just add something?
If you put your microphone on, Kelly, of course you can.
Thank you, Chair. So just to add to what Julie said, I think that the key is that we all know complaints are going up, but where we're trying to move to in the work that Julie's been doing is to be proactive rather than reactive. So rather than reacting to the complaints, is how we can change that and how we can actually minimise them by being a lot more proactive. So the two things that we are looking at, as we say, is the system. So we'll get a lot more data about what the complaint was about, and we can drill in a bit so we can then look at the areas and do a little bit more work. But also is the work that Julie referred to, working alongside customer services. So we're looking at how we can get better information out there, more information out to people, so that the access and availability of information is coming in. Because sometimes what happens is something comes in as a query, it's not answered, and then it turns into a complaint. So actually we want to minimise that by making sure that we're doing things right first time.
Okay, excellent, Richard. Councillor Castle, then Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, briefly, I mean, when is a complaint not a complaint? I mean, occasionally it is, as you rightly say, a statement of the situation which implies dissatisfaction, which isn't quite the same thing as complaining. I mean, everybody, the planning system is a classic in the sense that you are bound to displease the applicant or the objector. There's no avoiding that. But also social media has come into it now in a way that it never did before. And I'm one of the probably unwise councillors that gets involved. And I've got a thing called Annick Matters, in which I'm an administrator, and I keep the party politics out of it. But I've now had to make it clear that I won't take instructions as a councillor from social media. If you want to give me, do something, you must email me on my proper council email address. But that still doesn't work the way it gets vague. They will take a response that's given and then say, well, Councillor Castle, I did ask him, and but that he sent me a message on social media, or she, and I was just not good enough. And but it's part of the mix now, and it's part of how the people interact with the council, and it's quite an important way of knowing what to think. I just make that point. Thank you.
Thanks. Did you want to make a comment? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's both a blessing and a curse, isn't it, really, that we are so accessible. I mean, I see it as a blessing. Other people may not, but I think it's free feedback. This is the thing with complaints and with feedback. It's a free source of information. And whilst, yes, we are incredibly accessible, what we want to do is have the staff in place to be able to filter that information that's coming in and pull out all the useful parts that we need, so we can really drill down on trends and how can we help our residents. What is it that why are they coming to us? What information is it that they're not getting that we're putting out there, and what can we do to benefit it? So I think complaints need to be looked at very differently in terms of what they are. They're a gold ticket really for us to improve what we're doing. And we need to be able to funnel all those ways that information comes in. And that's another thing actually that I'm going to be doing on the system. I'm going to be recording the method of contact, and it would be really interesting to see the percentages of the way that, because it used to be letters, now it's hardly ever letters, it's always emails or social media. So I've taken all those things into account, so I'll be able to provide a breakdown of all this information that you'd be interested to know about, so that we can have a look at it and see where we can improve and what we can do.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you very much for the report. You used the word refresh and a new set of eyes. I welcome them because I think they do need moving on. I think we're looking at two different levels here. We're looking at the way the council themselves run through the officers, but I think the two councillors have kind of given personal issues and problems around the complaints that they receive. And I agree with Councillor Dodd that over the last 2 years, probably 3, but definitely over the last 2 years, things have escalated to get to its personal and it's attacking. And we all put our name forward to be a councillor to help our communities and work within our communities and make them better. But I'm mindful of the times that these complaints always come through as well. And the days. It always seems to be the latter part of the week, and dare I say after 7 o'clock, the witching hour, where the people just open the bottles of wine and they think the councillors can have an easy shot. So the reality is, it's the timing and how we indulge that information. And the one thing that probably hasn't been mentioned, it's great that if somebody's got a complaint about highways, now they're going to get in contact with the highways department in a timely way through business times. But as councillors, we have to deal with highways, the NEAT teams, the planning. So where the oracle that seems to know everything, it should have the answer for them. So when we start getting into complaints, there's also a concern of people's roles around that. Coming back to the idea of, you know, a review of the data, your early days, you said, you know, how's that going to roll out? Early days, will it be like a monthly review to a 2-monthly, to a 3-monthly, to a 6-monthly, to a yearly review? Or will it be a continuously tight review on it? Because I think this is it's a shifting monster all of the time. Thankfully, I'm not on Facebook, and I don't ever want to be on Facebook. But there are councillors that do, and it hits them mentally, and it draws people down, and it depresses people. So when you're looking at the complaints and them kind of issues and them kind of attacks to people personally that are trying to do the best thing, have to be considered as well. And dare I say, protected. Protected is the biggest word, because everybody can complain, but somewhere along the line there's protection of what we're trying to do. So thank you for Chair.
Okay, Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I thought it was interesting, and it definitely looks like we're moving in the right direction. I just wanted to check a few things just to make sure I'm understanding it correctly, if that's okay. All on page 19 of the report, where there's the summary and the implications. First of all, it's probably more efficient if I just fire them all off and then you answer them. The case management system, that's not just for complaints, is it? That's for anything which is reported to the council, whether it's like a pothole or a fallen tree. Yeah. Do you want to answer that now?
Right, yeah. It's probably does deserve some clarification. So what we've decided is that complaints require a bespoke system. So that would be linked into the customer services system, for customer contact, but a separate system that we're using for complaints. So they will talk to each other, but it will be a more secure system for complaints management, and it will have specific access to different drill downs to pull off the data that we need for complaints management that we wouldn't necessarily need for contact. So service requests, anything that we have an opportunity. The first opportunity we have to resolve something normally is a service request, regardless of how unhappy an individual may be. We have to be given that opportunity to resolve that concern. So it makes sense to have the two separate systems. So that's the answer to that question.
Thank you. Well, it's good to know it's a separate system because a complaint's different from a report. Thank you. I just wanted to check where it says that a central feedback team is going to be established. Is that the same as the customer response strategy working group, or is that something different?
I'll take that one. So yes, so what we have set up is, obviously we've got the customer response strategy working group, and that's looking at all kind of response to customers coming in. The complaint is one of the parts of that programme. We see that as an overarching programme around how we deal with people. Complaints is just one of the elements of that programme, ensuring that we are working across the board and we're not kind of doing anything in isolation. So it is a separate, it's different, but Julie is part of the customer response working group. I'm part of the leadership of that as well. So it's all interlinked, but the central team is separate.
Okay, thank you. The last question was, well, there's actually two more. It mentions continuing work through the improvement action plan. Is that the same as the complaints improvement framework?
Yes. Yes, it
Okay,
is
thanks.
the same, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the improvement framework, it's the actions that came off of the back of that improvement framework, because it was quite a large piece of work that we done, and then it was the actions that we identified from that improvement framework.
Brilliant, thank you. The very last point, if I may, was just that in the implications chart, there's nothing under equalities, and I think this does have implications for equalities, so I just thought I'd point out that it seems to have been missed.
Yep, okay, thank you. I'll take that on board.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you very much. Everybody done? It would appears so. So I think from our earlier discussion, you're coming back with a report in September, is that right?
Yep, there'll be an annual complaints report in September, which will also, I'll be here and giving an update on where we are and how we're doing with things.
Excellent. So we look forward to seeing you then. If you wish to stay for the rest, you're more than welcome. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that you've got other things on. Excellent. So, thank you. So where we are now is the monitoring work programme and monitoring report. Sean, do you want to just give us 2 minutes on that and then we'll move to urgent business?
1 minute, Chair.
Even better.
Yeah, I mean, the work programme is fairly well established for February and March, and there will be issues coming forward. We've talked about the bus partnership agreement, which we will add. So it may well be that we reprioritise some of those items, and 1 or 2 might fall into April, but essentially everything you see on there will be covered by the committee before the end of the council year. Unless there's anything else you want to add. And just to confirm what I said earlier about the issues that were raised at the last meeting, I have asked officers to get back to me on when those issues can be brought forward and put onto the work programme. So they haven't been forgotten, Chair.
I'm sure they haven't been forgotten. Right, so there we are. Then we move on to urgent business, which is kind of why we're all here, really, which is the decision we took to do like a proper deep dive into what went wrong and what went right for Storm Irwin, but we can't just kind of do that off the top of our heads. So a report was written, and I think it should have been sent to you, and you should have read it. And I think there's a paper copy on in front of you today. The way we're kind of going to do this, before we get into the conversation, we're just going to get Philip Hunter to talk to us about the report and the recommendations, and then we'll just have a general discussion about how all this is going to be dealt with. And you know, as usual, free for all, everybody can ask exactly what they want, and hopefully by the end of it we'll have a programme of how we're actually going to deliver what we're being asked to deliver. Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. So I think this is a fairly straightforward report. I hope members agree. It sets out, as you say, the suggested scope for the review of the response to Storm Irwin. And as you say, this committee want to identify what lessons can be learned across the council and beyond in partner organisations and in our communities to ensure that we can be as resilient as possible to future such extreme weather events should they occur. The report does set out a brief background and context in terms of what happened on the night of Storm Irwin and what happened subsequently in the days and weeks following that. I'm not going to go into that because all members will be well aware of what happened and how that played out in your respective communities. You know, you experienced that as residents and as county councillors, helping your communities to respond to that and recover. As you say, the review aims to examine the disruption caused by Storm Irwin and the response to that disruption, as well as identifying any gaps in terms of policy and plans within the council and beyond in other organisations. The report makes some high-level suggestions on how the review might engage with public, and I'm sure you'll be anxious to hear as many stories and testimonies from residents and what they experienced as possible. It suggests a list of partner organisations that the committee may want to invite to provide evidence. It also suggests that you may want to invite local MPs, county councillors and of course parish and town councillors to give evidence as part of the review. There's a suggested timetable in the report which effectively starts from today and your first consideration of the scope. through to a target date of July this year for writing and agreeing a report. So that's all I wanted to say, Chair, by way of introduction. The recommendations are there. I think they're clear. We are asking the committee to consider and agree the following. So consider the terms of reference and scope of the review, agree the membership of the review committee, agree a list of consultees to be interviewed, agree how communities will be consulted, agree a timetable for the review to be completed, and agree that the findings of the review will ultimately be reported to full council. Thank you.
Excellent, thanks for that. Now, the person on my extreme right is Helen, who is our head of contingency planning. So before I kind of open up the floor to comments and work through the recommendations, I just thought it would be handy if we had some input from the person who writes the reports and writes the strategy for us to make certain that we are able to deliver a safe and secure home for ourselves. So Helen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to attend the committee. Just as way of introduction, I'm the Business Resilience and Emergency Planning Lead for Northumberland County Council. I've been in post since mid-October. The Civil Contingencies team is a small team which sits under Phil's directorate, and we're a central team of 4 people. And it's our responsibility to ensure that the Northumberland County Council fulfils its obligations under a piece of legislation called the Civil Contingencies Act from 2004. Within that Act, certain organisations are categorised as either a Category 1 responder or a Category 2 responder. All local authorities are Category 1 responders alongside the people that you would expect, the emergency services, also the Environment Agency, and certain sectors of our health economy. Category 2 responders, and we have, under that Act, we have a number of duties. We've got 7 duties that we have to fulfil as a local authority. There are also Category 2 responders who are expected to work alongside and cooperate with Category 1s, and they are our utility colleagues, alongside other bits of the health economy and some other organisations. So one of the things I would say is it's not my team's job to go out and clear the trees and actually do the response. It's my team's job to make sure that the organisation can fulfil its responsibilities under the Civil Contingencies Act. So we have to work across the organisation to do that. We work very closely with our colleagues in Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service as well. So when Storm Arwen hit, or just before Storm Arwen hit, we were notified by the Met Office that a red weather warning had been issued. So we brought together colleagues from across the organisation to have an initial meeting to hopefully prepare in advance of Storm Arwen. And then we brought colleagues together to respond and work in partnership across something called the Local Resilience Forum, which is predicated within the Act and sits across the police force area. So it brings together all 6 local authorities, including ourselves, the 2 fire services, the police service, Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. We also have a voluntary sector on there, and lots of other people joined us over the course of the 10 days that we were meeting. That stood up on the evening of the 26th and continued to meet until, I think it was about the 12th of December. I can't remember the exact dates, but there were about 30 meetings of the tactical coordinated group within that time. Above that group, there is a strategic coordinating group, and that met between 7 and 8 times and was chaired by ourselves and also Northumbria Police. Is that okay, Chair? Anything else?
It's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
I was going to say, you'd be all right to field a couple of questions if there were any. Yeah, Councillor Castle.
Chairman, and whilst it's a good report, yes, this seems comprehensive to me and just what we would expect. One thing slightly missing, and this is not the place for a debate, I know this, Chairman, but a controversial aspect was the decision as to when to declare an urgent incident, which is a precursor, a necessary precursor to aid to the civil power, so the civil authority. And of course that involves the military. I'm a military man myself, and I won't express an opinion, but it was a controversial aspect as to why it might not have been done, and what might the military have done earlier that it didn't do. Is it worth considering in your review timetable asking an appropriate representative of the military to discuss what they might have been able to do that they didn't do, or to actually explain the limitations of what they could have done, which I'm well aware of. So I wonder whether, given that was a controversial aspect of the whole thing, would it be worth asking the military or consulting the military to see what they might have been able to offer that they weren't asked to offer? Thank you.
I can probably answer that, and the answer is we should be, and I don't know what, it didn't actually occur to me to have that added to the list. So.
And that's fine. That's what we'll hope to get from the meetings, Chair.
Thanks for raising that, Gordon. It's something that will be added to the mix now you've said it. Sorry, Helen, did you actually want to add to that?
Yes, sorry, I should have said the military actually sat on all of our TCG meetings as well, so they were involved in those conversations and they are an integral part of the Local Resilience Forum.
Councillor Mather, Councillor Dodd.
Thanks, Chair. When looking down the list of partner organisations, and they definitely need to be involved in this process, but I think that the Northumberland County Council needs to play a major part in this as well. Although we're the Scrutiny Committee, I think the council's going to be really how the decisions that was made and explaining how they came to those decisions. So I think that just needs remembered. But I think getting the information in as quickly as possible from as many different areas of the demographic is important. I'm just wondering what can the council do by setting up a dedicated email address, whether they use social media as well or other ideas that the council's got, to ensure that we do get thoughts and ideas and try and get them to be constructive of what we could have done better out of that. Because I don't see this being a negative report in any way. I think we need to congratulate a number of departments within the council. We need to congratulate a number of response services that worked very hard through a very difficult situation. But if we can learn how we can do that better, and that's what we want from the people.
Totally agree. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, we seem to have emergency committees for everything. Was our county council emergency committee sort of ever lent on or called together in any way, shape or form? I'll continue, but that's the first.
No, but it was a question I asked whether that committee should meet.
Right. If this vein is to continue, because let's face it, we do have, it was mainly set up for floods, etc. And I mean, there was a little time lag from the 28th, lead was passed 28th November to the declaration of whatever on the 3rd of December. I mean, we all, I mean, I woke up and spent 2 days clearing roads. I didn't realise it was as bad. I think everybody was in that same sort of, how bad's bad. Because this could have been a national disaster if a snowstorm, for instance, had followed in with this. The difficulty was, and I think where we were exposed, and I don't know how we do this, it's the reliance that we've become on these things and equipment in your house that gets you connectivity. Because some of these people or partners will go to our website. The information's on our website. Well, if you ain't got any power at all, you're going nowhere. And some of the things that sort of got to me was the communities that took a long time to get back, and I had two in particular, on power. It was the way they were told it'll be on tomorrow. It'll be on tomorrow. All right, we'll not need to go to a hotel tonight, it'll be on tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow, as you know, never comes. I still got some with telecom problems. I can understand that, you know, so many trees. We have to take a positive. I do, you know, let's get the grumpy negatives out the road, but take those negatives and make sure we don't do them again. Maybe we need to have a review on trees. You know, we're desperate to plant trees, I understand that. My farm was protected by a shelter belt that I planted in 2005. No damage whatsoever, apart from a few branches. But all I'm saying is we should take a plan out of this that will tick a few boxes of greening of the county. I've said this a number of times. It doesn't take much to think that we're just going to plant a few thousand acres in Otterburn and that's, you know, we can all get away on a plane again. That's wrong. We have to start and think a little bit more as a community where we're going to plant things that are going to provide shelter and other things. But if more of this is to come, and I think it probably will be until something changes, we really have to have a winter readiness like we do with the roads and we do with everything else now. I mean, I'm seeing generators now on the marketplace for about £100 to £120. And that, you know, in today's terms, that's not a lot to give you some minimalistic power. I mean, I found things in Darras Hall on Ponteland, there's bed and breakfast right next to the airport. And this is a week or a day after. And it wasn't just that this place was next to the airport, you know, the bed and breakfast on that roundabout. It was the electric gates. It didn't have power and it couldn't get in without lifting a generator over to power up to get the electric gates open. It's something so simple, and there was an elderly person sort of in trouble in there, and it's just little things like that we've become so used to. That electric gates need to have some sort of manual override that can open them, because it's these tiny little things of electricity connectivity. So I welcome that we're going to take something away with this, and I'd like to think that, I wonder where Councillor Bridget is. He had a lot to say, but I just like to think we can take a positive, and it's not just about rural, it's about everywhere, because it just is. Electric is everything.
Yeah, and before I bring Councillor Carty in, that's kind of what we hope will come out of taking evidence and speaking to people and asking people to give their experience, so we can say, well, actually, you know, if it ever comes to planning and somebody wants electric gates, well, you can have electric gates, but you better make certain they're able to operate manually. Those are the kind of, you know, nitty-gritty little recommendations, that useful stuff that I personally want to see come out of this. Absolutely. Councillor Carney. It's all right.
I have to agree with Richard on the tree one. I do think we need to have a look at the trees across Northumberland, not just in the rural areas. Obviously, they were really badly hit, but certainly in the area where I live, there was 17 trees came down in the park in front of my house. But the same type of trees, the same age of trees, are in the streets around where I live, in the gardens where I live, which are dangerous. And I just think the whole trees around these like areas where people live, children are coming in and out the park, and I'm really concerned about the way. I actually caught one of the trees on my camera at home fallen, and it was massive, over 100-year-old tree. And I just think, I looked down our street and I just thought, you know, a tree could have fell on a child, a tree could have fell on somebody, and we do actually check the trees in the park and everything, but we don't do anything to check the trees in people's private gardens that are just as much risk of killing somebody or seriously hurting somebody. And it really brought it home to me this time, because I see what's going on my street. The other thing is, right, when we have such an emergency like this, I would like to think that the staff that you would call on your normally day-to-day, like the head of the NEAT team and things like that, it would have been quite good if we have an emergency in the future, or if you know you're going to get an emergency in the future, that these people are going to be on standby to come in, because on the Saturday, I couldn't even get through on the emergency council lines because they were down. I actually ended up ringing one of the NEAT team workers that supports me in the community a lot. And he wasn't at work that day because obviously he wasn't at work, he wasn't charged, and he actually had to sort things out to get a tree removed right from the middle of a main road. And if it hadn't have been removed by the night time, that could have been a serious accident. So I do think it's about the people that can do things in the NEAT teams, the tree people, if they're kind of on some kind of an emergency standby when we know something's going to happen, you know, things like that. And because I couldn't get through on an emergency phone and I'm a councillor, what chance did any of the members of the public have? I was lucky. I was able to contact people. That's all I've got to say.
That's absolutely fine. What I would say is if you got a photograph of a tree falling, you should send it to us.
Just comes down like that.
Yeah. So, but I'm quite happy to take sort of anecdotal stuff now, but the point of what we're talking about now is to set up the way we're going to do this, and for people to come and tell us that in a forum where it can be sort of gathered and put into a report, and we then can think about what recommendations we might pull together. I'm going to bring Sean in and then council.
Just on that point, the list I gave earlier about the actions from the last meeting, the trees and woodland policy was actually also on it for review by this committee.
It's serious, Jeff, honestly. It needs looking at for everybody, everywhere. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. Did you indicate, Brian? Yeah, Brian and then
Yes,
Nick.
Chair. Thank you. Not being sarcastic, but Mr. Hunter, you'd never introduced who you were. I didn't know what department you were in.
It's my fault. I beg your pardon.
We've got new members. So, you know, thank you, Helen, because you indicated you were for Phil Soderquist.
I knew who he was.
If I may, Chair, I do apologise.
No, that's not a problem.
Philip Hunter, Interim Senior Service Director.
Okay.
That probably hasn't answered your question, has it?
It's given us some direct. I didn't know if you worked for NCC or you were here.
I do apologise.
I didn't have a clue who you were.
I work for NCC.
We'll move on from that. That's fine. But just to pick up on the points that were said, Northumberland is a strange county. It's a lot of it urban and a lot of it rural, and those different things that happened within that storm were totally different in the southeast part to where they were up at Councillor Dodd's farm and further up the country. But the reality is that, you know, it was very difficult to get through. I had people on the phone to me because they were so frustrated trying to get through to the council. I think a lot of people took it on board to say these were extreme circumstances, and they took that on board. But that's something we've got to learn from the contact. And it might be an idea to have a local contact places as well. Not that you're wanting people to go out, but at least there's that reassurance that if your electric and your heating's gone off, and I'm thinking more of the old and the vulnerable and young families. And rightly said by Councillor Dodd, you know, to put somebody off and say it's coming tomorrow, I think we would prefer if we say, look, the electric is going to be on for 3 days, and then you can make decisions. But if you're continuously being held on by whatever department, I think that was a bit unfair. Care homes and schools, we need backup systems in there, and we need them to be making sure that they work. And ironically, through planning, we should make that a condition on any new builds, and just say right from now on, you know, what happens if scenario. The other one is it wouldn't go down too well is planning and enforcement. I think that needs to be strengthened up massively. So we should have people, for example, in my hometown of Ashington, at least once a year going around and having an anecdotal survey and pointing out to residents or businesses the conduct, the condition of their properties. Because let's face it, a slate can come off, a tile, anything could come off and could kill somebody. So the reality is there's a lot of properties in my town, Blythe, Alnwick, where, you know, a knock on the door and a reminder to say, look, we are the enforcement team here. We went through a really bad storm and we're looking at the condition of your roof and you need to get that fixed. We can't just keep on closing our eyes to what's going on. And the other thing is, it was pointed out about the NEAT teams. The NEAT teams did tremendously well.
Brilliant.
Now, a lot of the issues on this particular time, what everybody's talking about, are trees. We should have a standing training program so that we're not, so these people that, dare I say, the guy who's the road sweeper is trained to use the machinery in the case of an emergency. Because nobody wants to pick up the equipment if they're not trained and they haven't got the tickets for it, because that makes them as vulnerable. Even though they want to do the right intentions and make sure things are safe and well, I think there has to be a training program of emergency within the teams. Right, thank you.
Okay, Nick then, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. A quick point about trees and then a question. I think we definitely ought to bring the trees and woodland policy to scrutiny, and we should scrutinise that policy as part of our Storm Arwen response review. And we can talk about the number of ash trees with ash dieback. That's an important consideration. We can talk about the government's elms environmental land management scheme, which is going to pay landowners public money for public goods, and that could include planting trees as a shelter belt. My question was about, on page 5, it talks about a task and finish group. And in the chart on page 4, it says that each evidence gathering session will be led by a review committee. Are they the same?
They are.
Great. And who will decide how large they are and who sits on them?
If you look at the recommendations on the front, you'll discover that it's us. Agree the membership of the review committee was what it says. So that's kind of, I have given people a lot of latitude to try and get them into what we need to be talking about at these review sessions. But really what we need to be doing is talking about those 6 things. And then we can move forward. We can call the evidence sessions. We can get Sean to open up the emails and ask councillors to give anecdotes and residents and all the rest of that stuff. So that, you know, but I thought it was important that I let people give a flavour of some of their experiences. Richard?
Yeah, just looking at this list on page 3 of the partner organisations, I was at the Morpeth LAC on Monday night, and we had a presentation from the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, and I said that they are always the sort of the help out guys when there's trouble. You know, they're more than just fire now. It's lots of different things, and I think they should be included in that list if they're not in there already.
Well, I'll just say that the reason they're not there is because they are part of the council, they're not a partner organisation.
Okay, fine.
It is the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, and as you know, they're part of our staff.
Yeah.
So that's why it's not there. But what I have just seen, I saw the last thing, the military are actually down to be asked to come and speak to us. Anyway, sorry, Richard,
Yeah.
didn't mean to.
No problem. I just wanted to flag that up, but I thought, you know, they are one of our blue light operators. And also, it's got parish and town councils. Now, some town councils are different to the little remote parishes. I mean, I can just go on a little remote parish and there'll be lots of them in a similar sort of situation where little villages are knocked out. Not for, you know, we can all manage the 1 or 2 nights or whatever, but when it goes on and it's not very warm. And there's generally a parish stroke hall, and I think we could look separately with the what I call the remote parishes. Because I'm trying to work with Capheaton Village Hall and that Capheaton area where a lot of places were knocked out, but at least we're trying to work towards, at least if the village hall has a source of power, a source of heat, a source of, you know, it's simple stuff. It's not rocket science. And what else is required for a little community that needs help? You know, there's always tractors and there's always diggers and there's always stuff out there that will always come to the rescue. But it's having that one place where, you know, if it is a constant, the lesson learned that if it goes on and on, people do get a little bit frayed. And we've got to have that, make sure that these people, they'll do it all for us. We've just got to put them all together and say, well, you do need an X generator and a Y cooker or whatever you need to do just to get them into order. I'm trying to do that with what I've called my places. Mark will have loads more. Stephen Bridge, you know, further up where there are these not lost, but just stuck in the middle of nowhere communities. That's all.
Remote, Richard, I think you'll find is the word.
They're not too remote, you know. It's just when you've got nothing, it's remote.
But again, I think that would be something that we might put in a recommendation at the end, that, you know, these small parishes are encouraged to have a place that will always have power. I don't think there'd be anything, but would need to, you know, that'll come out of the evidence gathering thing. But are you saying that that the remoter parishes should be in a different place than the others?
I think it needs thought, Chairman, because their problems will be very similar, and they'll be very different to a town council, which has got a lot more money and other things.
Yeah, okay, fine. So, Councillor Castle, Councillor Mather.
Just to apologise, yes, I didn't notice the minute it was on. I just read this too thoroughly, but fine, it's important.
Yeah.
I did want to say, though, as time went on, one thing I did notice was the assessments of who was actually vulnerable and hadn't been seen became an issue, who hadn't been visited, because we have a care home, we have a visiting care system, we have a care system, but those who have actually taken on private care, we didn't seem to know about. So there were those in the community, one relied on neighbours and friends and family to know that actually they had carers. And I wonder if we have a system set up such that we would know who the vulnerable in the community are and what their care arrangements are, so we can be confident that they are receiving and probably getting the kind of response you would hope that the most vulnerable would get, because there was a bit of uncertainty as time went on as to what that actually was. Thank you.
Councillor Mather.
Thanks, Chair. Just to come back to what Richard was saying about, you know, I've got some parish councils and they all reacted to the storm in a different way, and I would like to think that something does come out of this review where how NCC supports parish and town councils and village halls on their own response. It's something that I was already working on before the storm, and I know NCC has facilities there to support them. So I think something good will come out of this to just push that on and bring it to the forefront. But I think that's something that will come further down the line with the review. That was what I was thinking of. I just wanted to make that comment.
Nick, and then I'm going to start working on these recommendations unless Brian's got some earth-shattering thing to tell us afterwards. Nick.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that a few parish councils in my ward have said that they want to improve their emergency response plans and make sure that they dovetail well with the county council's emergency response plans. So that's definitely something that I'd be looking to do later down the line.
Excellent. Well, that sounds as though we've got a recommendation already, Sean. Brian.
Chair, just very, very quickly to the partner organisations, and I think Councillor Castle come up with a valid point around private care homes, doctors and hospitals. Should they not be, we should get some feedback from those people of how they operated through that. And ironically, on the back of COVID as well, that was a difficult one. But it's just generally some feedback of how they operated.
Well, I don't see why not, but I think we're probably would be asking for some sort of evidence from them as individuals. I think the list is, when you look at it, the big organisations that actually had struggling with the getting the infrastructure to work, rather than being at the kind of the really sharp end, you know, doctors not being able to get places, care homes. We need to hear what they've got to say. But, you know, a lot of, perhaps we might come to the thought that Northern Power Grid have got a lot to answer for, and would really need to, you know what I mean? So I think there are different categories. These people in the list would be the people that we use to help us deliver the service and the help we provided, rather than the people that took the help.
I totally agree with your train of thought, but my train of thought is preparation. This storm didn't come overnight, and it was just to see how those individuals prepared for what was coming, because some people did and some people didn't, and they just thought it was going to be a one-off storm overnight and away. But the reality is, you know, did people take it seriously enough? That's basically what I'm, and generally the ones that didn't, did they suffer? And the ones that did they manage to get through with a recognised plan? Well,
and I think that's probably what we're going to try and get to at the end. So to make this, well, I don't think it is contentious, but I think that if we start at the bottom and work up from the recommendations, would everybody be happy with that? That we agree that the findings of the review will ultimately be reported to council. I don't think any of us have any problem with that, so that's fine. Agree a timetable for the review to be completed. Now, you can see it says July, and I would hope that that was kind of as far away as it could be, and it may be possible to move that up, but I wouldn't want to be putting us under too much. What's more important is we get the correct answers rather than get it finished by May or whenever. So I would rather, I'm happy to leave it at July with the hope that we might get it done before then. Is that all right, Sean? Are we able to do that?
Absolutely, and I think obviously when we get the evidence, the submissions in, we'll have a better idea,
right,
of the workload that generates.
Right. So are we happy that we can work to this timetable? Yeah, it would appear we are. Right, the next thing, agree how the communities will be consulted. I think that's probably, we've had a suggestion that the council create its own email address and ask, you know, our WIN email address and ask people to send their written submissions to that. But I would, you know, I think that's just one way. I think we'd be happy to take snail mail or, you know, stuff that councillors get from people, just, you know, every way possible, really. Are we able to codify that, Sean, or how would you see that?
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly something we can do. And as we said in the briefing, I think there's a lot of members will probably already have a lot of emails received from people in their wards. So whether the emails come to me or we set up a separate email address, which would be my preference, if we encourage members to forward any submissions that they've received to that. Well, 2 members have already started to do that, and that would be useful, Chair.
Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think a separate email address would be good, and then maybe yourself, Chair, and you know, Sean and people can all have access to that to make it easier. But Helen had an interesting train of thought in the pre-meeting about using an external company to go out there and do some of this fact-finding for us, for people that maybe aren't as confident to put in an email or to make contact with the council, but to ensure that we still got those stories. I don't know if we could ask Helen to...
We'll ask Helen to expand on that, if that's okay, Helen.
Yeah, it sounds very grand when you say it's a company. It's some researchers that I've worked with in the past through Durham University. They have an After Disasters Network, which is a network of researchers that work in the community. I've had a very preliminary conversation with one individual who I know personally, and he is interested to come and work with us His research specialism is around social capital, so it's about specifically working within communities. And the reason I've suggested this is I think we risk not hearing the quiet voices in the communities if we just ask people to be proactive in contacting us. If we go out there and talk to them and help have facilitated conversations in a hopefully neutral manner, we might get valuable stories back from the communities. I haven't scoped this out any further than, would you be interested in going and working with some Northumberland communities? And he said yes, and that's about as far as that conversation went. There are other researchers that would be willing to work with us as well, so it's not just a case of a one-man band.
So we're happy to, is that you, Eileen? Do you want to? Yep.
I just want to expand on that. If you want to reach the people that are hardly heard in the community, you need to reach out to the community centres and places like that and have some kind of question sheets in and work with the people who work at grassroots community level.
Yeah, his background is in exactly that field, is working at that grassroots level. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Councillor Castle.
Yeah, what we're saying is proactively getting information, not just passively waiting for people to come to us.
Absolutely,
I call them the silent majority, and we should reach them. Thank you.
Because that's where all the pearls of wisdom are going to come from in the end. Yeah. Okay, so have we got a note of all that? Are we happy with that, Sean? Is there some vehicle that you think we should use that we haven't talked about? Or, and before I bring you in, can we make certain that if anybody comes up with a brilliant idea that we haven't thought of, just do it? Yeah, is that, TikTok videos or anything?
No, I mean, as soon as we do get the infrastructure set up, such as an email address or a portal through communications, we will let members know and encourage members, obviously, to forward. So we will inform members, we will inform the parish and town councils about how to communicate to us. So obviously there will be those who have already done so, but we will write to those in case there are any issues that they haven't.
And hopefully we'll encourage the town and parish councils to use their connections to get them to send stuff to us too. Yeah, is that right?
We'll get some words for that.
Excellent, right, so the next one is agree a list of consultees stroke interviews. I'm not... Sorry, Sean, can I just ask you to talk us through that?
I don't think we know the answer to that.
Yeah,
until we get the responses
well, thanks,
in,
I'm glad it's not just me. So, could you explain how that's going to, how we might do that?
Well, as I say, until we get the responses in and we understand the different categories of responses, we'll be able to sort of formulate a set of reviews from that. So we've got the list that we've already referred to, and as you've already said, if there are any others that we haven't thought of that we could add to it. But the first intention really is to write to members, write to town and parish councils, get an email address, do something through communications, and then there will be responses come in, and then we'll sift through those, categorise them, and then use those categories to set up the evidence sessions.
So can I suggest then we just change that rather than we agree to compile a list of consultees and interviews.
We won't know that until...
Is that rather than, because we can't decide that now.
No.
So we're all right if we agree to compile a list? Yeah, it would appear. So that's changed to compile. Are we all right with that?
Yeah, I mean, that would be one of the first tasks of the review panel, wanted to assess the responses and to determine how they want to deal with them through the evidence session.
But yeah, Richard, please rescue me.
I mean, we have powers, but they're limited. I mean, we can request Northern Power Grid come. They don't. It's not a statutory thing. Our powers are persuasion and to say, can you tell us what went wrong or what went right? I don't think we've got the power to instruct people to come here, have we?
Absolutely not. I think what we'll do with Northern Power Grid is probably speak to them and say, would you like to come and tell us how you managed so well?
I'll leave it at that then.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right, we can only ask. But if the people don't want to come, then we can draw our own conclusions, can't we? I mean, when this isn't a witch hunt, this isn't a, you know, firing squad. This is a genuine attempt of the council to try and come up with some ideas that if this happens again, which I think we all agree it probably will at some point, then there is a set of, that Helen has drawn up a strategy and a plan that will immediately put people on standby, will, you know, tell the parish councils that this is going to happen and they'd better start the generator and the, you know, whatever. It's not about blaming anybody. It's about trying to come up with solutions that have come out of the community to protect ourselves against stuff like this happening. And it may not necessarily be a storm, it may be floods, it could be fires, it could be anything.
I can just say, I thought that the build-up to the storm and the communications were very, very good. But obviously, once the storm had been through and a lot of communication stuff was down, it then had, you know, maybe we need to work with, say, BBC Radio Newcastle, because most people have a radio of some description who can communicate, because a lot of this, you know, I think it was in here on the Friday of some description, went home thinking, well, nothing's happening yet. But then the trains were cancelled north of Morpeth or Newcastle. The A1 was actually closed. And you know, I wonder what more, because that, let's face it, doesn't matter how bad this forecast is, there's always someone going to try and get through somewhere. And I thought those measures were very, very good. Otherwise, things could have been an awful lot worse. But I think we do need to use that secondary sort of communication, which could be local radio, to say this is that and that. It's just I think we need to think it out again. We can't rely on Facebook, because Facebook's off. Yeah, well, but you know, all of these things are very valid, Richard, and you've obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it, so that's great, and all of that can be fed into what we're talking about. So we're going to move on to the next thing, which is agree the membership of the review committee, and that's kind of I'm not certain how we do this. I mean, I don't think it should be any more than 8 myself, because I think beyond that, you know, it just becomes unmanageable, really. And you certainly wouldn't want it. Well, I think 8's the right number, but I'm quite happy to take a counter view from anybody here. Richard? I think, can we delegate this to yourself, your vice chairman, and Sean, just to say, if anyone's interested, because it has to go beyond the scope of scrutiny at some point. It doesn't have to, I'm just saying, maybe ask for expressions of interest. You don't know. I mean, no, because you don't know how long a bit of string is.
Well, yeah, but it's also, it's like, you know, I don't want the responsibility. I don't want people having to go. Me.
I'll decide. I'll put them all in a tin and pull them out. All I'm saying is, have a system. If they want 8, you get 8. Let's not go back to last Wednesday.
No, absolutely not. But I am kind of told that it needs to be proportionate. But I'm not particularly very worried about that. I mean, and I was kind of lobbied yesterday to make certain that there was somebody from health and well-being on it, and I thought, well, that would be a good idea if Richard was on it, and then he would be wearing 2 hats, and that would be great. So if you would do it, Richard, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think you've got a committee in front of you, Chair, and that's why we came, the Scrutiny Committee. It's the Scrutiny Committee doing the work, so that's where the review group... Well,
absolutely, yeah. You
just put our hands up, and if you get 8, you get 8. If you don't, you'll have to try again somewhere else.
Is that something we can do, Sean?
That's exactly what you can do, and if you need to make up the membership from members of the other committees, that's what we'll do. So, for example, if we get 4, we can go and get another 4. With regard to proportionality, it's a task unfinished group, it's not caught under the Act. So it needs to look right. So as long as it looks right, but I think geographical proportionality is probably
Well, but you see, I'm, as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking at perfect geographically split. So if all 8 of you here would volunteer, that would just make my day. But there's Councillor Carty going, no, not me. So, but what I would say, but seriously, that's what I would hope we could, if the 8 of us could decide to do it today, that'd be fantastic. But what I would say is that it is quite a heavy load, and I would hope that, if you volunteer to do it, then you need to commit yourself to turn up to the 4 evidence gathering sessions and read what's sent to you, and contribute, and have questions for the people that come before us, and do a proper job, which we are all more than capable of doing. But it is a commitment, because the evidence gathering sessions won't be, we'll be in here 59 minutes, I've got to go. If it takes us 3 hours, then it takes us 3 hours, as far as I'm concerned. So there is a commitment. If we're going to do this properly, then it needs to be done properly. And I certainly would, asking for volunteers in this group would be fantastic, and that's what I'm going to do.
Right, I'll put my name down.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Yeah. Mark, Castle, Morfitt, Gallagher, Hardy. Hey, I'm getting to know everybody now. I think it's a miracle. Eileen, are you?
I can't 100% commit to every meeting, and you know that, because I work full time.
Oh, that's fine.
I mean, I'm quite committed to actually working at the grassroots level. You know me, I'm a community worker in the urban areas, and that's where my skills would be, getting in there with.
And so you will contribute.
In that respect,
brilliant,
yeah.
Excellent.
Oh, absolutely, because I really want something done with the trees. I want them looked at. Really.
Excellent. Okay, yep. You need to put your microphone on, Brian.
Sorry, one person that we've never mentioned is Stephen Bridget. He was very active within this particular problem, and I think that he should be welcomed on. But we've got to be very mindful. It's great that everybody's here, and I'm looking around, everybody represents different wards and different areas. So we're covering Northumberland. I was more fearful that we ended up getting 8 names that basically were all in one area. We'll have to hear the experiences, and we'll have to hear the problems and the good things about what had happened throughout that. So the people that's volunteered are wide scoping for Northumberland, and I think will be of benefit. I'm a bit more, I'd rather be in front of myself than running towards a July deadline of, the past things. I think that, as the results come through, as we work with organisations, if we get specific information coming from them, I think that should be filtered through ASAP onto the council with a final report. And touching back with communities, not everybody's on an email, not everybody's on Facebook. So maybe it's a trial that we look at somewhere, for example, like Blythe. I'm trying to get away from Ashton, but like Blythe, and we put a leaflet drop out there, a leaflet questionnaire, and see what the results of that are, see if there's an uptake on that. So that gets the elderly and the vulnerable to get that little bit of say on there, as well as go down the routes that have been discussed before. And then that way it's not a full cost to the council to go Northumberland wide. Because, what they say is on a return for something like that, 10% is really good. But 10% as well as the other connections, it covers everything.
Okay, so, Mark.
Chair, can I echo what you're saying about Stephen Bridget? I think he would be a great asset to the team. But I think if you're going to do a leaflet drop, you have to decide you'll do the whole of Northumberland. I think for the time scale, to do one and wait and see what got back, and then to do the rest of the county, I think no matter if you're a rural or in a, Blythe or Ashton or wherever, everybody's voice counts, and I think you have to do one for everybody, or none at all, would be my comment.
Okay, Mr Hunter, then Eileen Carley. Okay. Miracles do happen. Mr Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. It was just in response to the points raised about the questionnaire. I mean, there are methods that we could use. There's some people in the council that can sample, basically, so that you wouldn't have to go out to all, every household in the county. But if you do the sampling right, and you'll be aware of some of that, you can get a representative sample. So that's something that we could look into if the committee want to.
Well, just to come back on that, you'll find that when a questionnaire comes out, it doesn't lie on people's tables. So the reality is when somebody's got a questionnaire in front of them, they'll fill it in and they'll get it away straight away. So we still have a timely thing that we could put out locally to see if it works, and then county-wide. But I'm quite happy to go either way. I'm just thinking of the cost, that's all, to the county.
See, I think you've got two different areas. You've got rural.
You need to put your microphone on, Councillor Carley.
I'm just saying you've got totally different areas. You've got the problems in the urban area was so different to the rural areas. We didn't have problems with electricity going off in Blythe, but we had major problems elsewhere. Whereas in the rural areas, there was a lot of power cuts and things like that. But I do think to get the whole cross-section, I think perhaps a sampling might be a better idea if it's worked before. Have a look at it. I mean, we've just got to try these things, haven't we?
We do. So I think we've kind of agreed that the 7 of us here are on the, plus Councillor Bridget, but I think rather than just say that he is, I think if we could, ask him, say we felt it was important that he was on, but we didn't want to be kind of presumptuous and just do it, because, it is a commitment, and, and he actually might want to just come and say, this is what happened, rather than, hear stuff. So more than happy to have it that way, but let's make sure that he's, let's ask him first. Nick.
Thank you. Just to mention that someone will have to decide at some point whether I'll remain on the review committee.
No, sorry. Regardless of what happens proportionally wise, you're on. So that's that. We've decided that this is the group. You're on it. Doesn't matter what happens elsewhere. You're here till the end, whether you like it or not. Right. So the last thing. Consider the terms of reference scope of the review. Do you want to do that, Sean? Or are we just content that we?
This is essentially a sort of a scoping report of the situation as it was before Christmas. And there may well be points that you want to add to it, with the benefit of hindsight, or it may well be that the review group picks up issues as it goes along that perhaps we haven't foreseen until we actually get the evidence. I should also say, I mentioned it earlier as part of some comments about the trees and what have you, is that when we do the final report and it goes to council and it is agreed, the assumption is that it will come back to this committee in a year's time or whatever and say, look, is there anything we add? Or are we on track to implement recommendations that was agreed at council? It's not anticipated that we do a piece of work and then we forget it.
Well, it's not like a motion, you mean?
No. You know, you drew me into that. I don't. But that's the intention. It would be the intention to sort of to review it and make, just like you mentioned before about having a highway strategy that comes back to this committee to review. It would be assumed that it's a civil contingency type health check. And sort of
Councillor Cardy.
Chair, I will commit, but what would be very helpful if you could plan for the next few months what dates you're going to meet. Can that not happen? Can that not be scheduled in, and then I can do my diary in advance?
Chair, I'm not really sure.
Sorry, decisions made.
Right, okay, fine.
You saved me from a very difficult position, Eileen. I'm not gonna ask you to do it again. what I need you to do though is I need you to, you know, put all of that community stuff you've got into the system.
I think that's where my skills would
Yeah, oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so what are we doing about this top recommendation then, Sean? I mean, you know,
I think if members are quite happy with the report, we just agree with the report as it is.
right,
And as I say, there will be other issues that come forward. And it's up to the review group to say, actually, we acknowledge those issues, but to deal with them, it's going to add another month or 2 months onto the process. So we acknowledge it and put it to one side, concentrate on the terms of the review, and perhaps come back to those as a sort of a separate standalone item, such as perhaps the trees and woodlands issue. That might be a standalone item for the group.
sorry, this is just my pedantry coming in. Let's consider the terms and reference and scope of the review. That's what the recommendation says. So how do I change that to get past it? Mark?
Chair, could we change it to consider the current terms? Because I think I think it's a very exciting thing that we're about to start and do, but it's going to be a very fluent thing. We're not sure what's going to come through the door. The public might bring a query in that we've never thought of. So if we set the current terms and reference, which allows us to be flexible as the group goes on, if we need to change direction, then that allows us to do that.
Although acknowledging not to be too fluid, or else you'll never get to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that works either, actually.
The word consider is quite wide-ranging. We have considered it.
Yeah.
I just agree.
But we haven't agreed it. There you see, Councillor Castle, as wise as ever, and we've considered it, but we've decided not to do anything about it. That's brilliant. Nick?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about the scope of this at the minute, because the terms of reference it finishes by saying talking about building better resilience for events in the future, but I'm not sure if we've actually specified what type of events. And you were talking about, you mentioned that it's not all about storms, there's also floods and fires and whatever else. So how wide is our scope? Because we could certainly talk about floods as well. You know, if we come up with an improved policy for the county council, an improved disaster response policy, it could well include things like floods. But we do have flood warden groups already, so we don't want to duplicate work. So I don't have an answer or even a suggestion. I just thought I ought to raise that point.
I just thought you'd stir the pot, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, what the review's about is the storm. In whatever can be transferred out of that, we certainly should, but we can't slip into, you know, well, what happens if the place caught fire? And I know I said it, but there'd be some of the stuff we're going to say will transfer to that. So, Richard?
I think the point is this was a storm with very high winds that caused electricity and stuff to go off. I know that we have plans for fire, we have plans for flood, we have a lot of plans, flood wardens, there's lots of things for other things. It's already there. You know, winter readiness for roads and clearance of roads and all that. This is particularly about a storm, and a storm that has a knock-on effect of electricity. And I think that, you know, if we're going to do something like this, we are going to get bogged down into sort of taking evidence, he said, she said, whatever, or this happened, that didn't happen, and whatever. There will be a bit of knife thrown around. But I think at some point we're going to have to say, well, yeah, that happened. The lessons are here, and this is what we need to do in the future. So it's probably a three-parter. You've got 4 meetings lined up, but I think the evidence is getting the football on the pitch, and then we've got to play with it for a little while, and then we've got to come up with a result.
So, yeah, I mean, that was really the point of doing the scoping report, was based on the information that we had at the time, and really kicking the process off, knowing that it was going to come here for members to discuss it. That was essentially the...
Okay, I've slightly I do apologise for wandering off at a tangent. I don't do it very often, as you know, but I have today. So if we are content, unless Councillor Castle has
No, I think you've got there. I think you have, because we're agreeing it subject to any changes that prove to be necessary,
Yeah.
as long as they're limited to the actual
Event.
incident. Yeah.
It would be up to the review group to review that.
Right, excellent. Well, there we are then. Thank you all very much. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting, does it not, Sean?
Hope so.
And thank you all for coming. Thanks for all your forbearance. And I look forward to seeing you when Sean says we're going to have our first evidence session. I take it we are just going to be sharing emails and stuff long before that, though, Sean, aren't we?
Well, I mean, absolutely. As soon as we've put things in place, I will let you know where we are in the various stages leading up to the session.
Yeah. And, you know, if everybody's got WhatsApp, I guess we could create a WhatsApp group between us.
Come on.
Do have a young person in the room.
Well, anyway, thank you all for attendance. The next meeting is...
Chair, just
Yeah.
before we move on, these meetings are going to take place, they're going to be very crucial, and they're going to bring a lot of people in. They will either be face-to-face, Teams or Zoom meetings. And I'm more thinking of the time, because we're all mindful of being in front of ourselves on this. So I understand that some of these meetings may take place on Teams or Zoom, and some will have to take place. Is it easier to set up a Zoom meeting than what it is to set up this meeting?
It really depends on the participants. It really depends on the people we're bringing in. I think one of the first sessions that we do might be just the group, to sort of say, look, this is where we're at. This is what we've done since the meeting in February. These are the type of responses we've got in. Now what do you want us to do? But as far as the evidence sessions are concerned, I mean, we really won't know the answer to that until we see who the invitees are.
Yeah.
Just something to be mindful
No,
of,
it's
because
a very-
like Colin's got a long way to come.
It may well be that it's sometimes we have people coming on the screen. If some people can be here but other people can't, we might have a screen set up. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, but it's a very good point, actually. But we need to get the maximum input from people, certainly that some of the big partners that we've got, and they might think it easier if they're not here rather than if they are. But we shall between us all, we shall solve every problem.
It was more around our strategy, our plan, how we deal with this. Do I want to allow key players, energy companies, to get away with sitting on a video call?
That's what I've just said.
I want them to feel as though they're being scrutinised.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking for the speed of grouping together, getting our plans, getting our strategies together, with the outcomes heading towards July.
Yeah, I think it's probably, with that, it's probably a combination of everything then, Sean, yeah?
I mean, certainly as far as that group is concerned, you might want to set up as a sort of a horseshoe, most how a select committee is run, where you have the chat from the power grid at the bottom, and you all sit around in the way that a select committee is run. But we just need to understand the responses and the participants before I can say today how each one's going to run.
Okay. Excellent, thanks for that. Well, I'll just check to make sure when the next meeting is.
2nd of March.
Well, there we are, 2nd of March. February.
Are we? What, January?
This is January. No, it only feels like it. We only feel as though we've been here a week. Anyway, so if we just bring the recording to an end now, and thank you all for your attendance. I look forward to seeing you all soon.